9. Mia stayed awake. While the kids slept, their tiny paws twitching against her belly, she kept her tired eyes fixed on the dense icicle entrance, and she thought about her mom. It was scary work keeping kids safe. They were fragile, wriggly little things, so cute and tiny that she couldn't help but worry over every whisker. She imagined leading a kid, who still had her milk teeth, out of the ivy wood, across the open fields and into a forest. The thought made her heart hurt. It was scary enough keeping an eye on kids in an enclosed den. Ting, tingle, tink. Sniff, sniff. Mia perked her ears. She widened her eyes. That wasn't the wind. One of the kids whimpered, then another. Hush, she told them. Snowflakes whirled through the icicles like breath through clenched teeth. Uli, she said. She listened for the familiar crunch of his paws, watched, hoping to see him shake the snow from his coat and triumphantly drop a groundhog carcass. Uli, she said, more sternly, hoping to make him appear. The snow didn't answer. Her whiskers told her something was there, but she couldn't see it, couldn't hear it. She sniffed the crisp air, snip, snip, and thought she smelled apples. Her breath caught. Mom? She sniffed again, this time catching a faint yellow scent. Miss Fix? A swirl of snow blew into the den, sweeping the scents away. Now she smelled nothing but winter. Mia gave her head a shake. She was exhausted, delirious. The snow was shifting, releasing old scents. The cold was reaching into her past and drawing out memories. Hush, hush, she said, nuzzling the kids closer. It was just our imaginations. She laid her head down and let her eyes flutter shut. Mia jerked awake. She had accidentally fallen asleep. She sniffed the kids, Roa, Wooly Jr., Alfie, Marley. Busy? She called. Mia was up on her paws, frantically sniffing the den for the baby girl kid. Busy wasn't there. Mia darted to the entrance and slipped outside, searching frantically. There was no trace of dusty fur, no tiny-sized meows, no little tracks or flops in the snow. Busy! She cried into the storm. Yelp if you can hear me! There were no whimpers, no howls. Mia squinted through the gales crashing against each other, hoping to catch a hint of dusty fur breaking up the white. There, 20 foxtails away, the snow bent around an animal shape. She darted toward it and bit deep, but her teeth caught nothing but snowflakes. She whirled, sniffing. All that remained was a fleeting scent, moldy and sweet, as if the creature was nothing but a ghost. How was she supposed to fight something that wasn't even there? The kids whined in the den, begging her to come back. Mia trembled. What was she supposed to do? She couldn't leave Busy out there alone. She was supposed to be protecting her. Instead, she'd fallen asleep, and the baby kid had vanished as quiet as snowfall. Mia stood, helpless, staring into the blizzard, and she thought of her mom again, that moment when she'd let Mia down. Finally, Mia let the tiny house draw her back to the den. She curled up with 4 remaining kids, whose whines quickly melted into whimpers. She snuggled them close as she imagined Busy being carried through the icicles and through the snows, eyes open, tongue poking out of her mouth. Frost crept across Mia's heart, and it froze over. 10. Mr. Scratch looked more deranged than ever. His ears were chewed through, his fur shredded by bats. A gash glistened on his chest, showing bone beneath. His head sat twisted on his spine, and he angled a blooded eye toward Uli. Oh, now, Mr. Scratch said through slashed lips. Don't give me that look. You act as if I'm the villain. He leaned closer. And yet you are the one who led a badger into my territory. You made my wives lie to me. You schemed to chase me from my own kingdom, and now you are stealing the food I was going to eat. Uli was silent, his mouth still full of mice. Mr. Scratch grinned. If you lay down that food and bare your throat to me, I just might let you off with one less paw. You could use your remaining two to scoop back to that little vixen, he chuckled. She might even still find you Dan worthy. Uli's mom was no longer there to help him escape. Neither was Mia. He couldn't outrun Mr. Scratch on 3 paws. Of course, Mr. Scratch continued. If you disobey me, then I will reclaim what is rightfully mine, your body. I'll chew you up and make a new kid that isn't a failure. Uli's jaw trembled, and he almost dropped the mice. He thought of the 6 hungry mouths waiting for him back at the den. He thought of Mia. He slid onto his stomach and then rolled onto his back, baring his throat. Mr. Scratch stepped close, his fangs hovering over Uli's throat. You forgot to spit out the food. Uli looked up sheepishly. Then, with his all might, he drove his forepaw into his father's chest wound. Mr. Scratch shrieked, and Uli leaped up and ran. 11. Mia watched the den's entrance with unblinking eyes. Busy was out there somewhere, cold and helpless. The kids were quiet, pressing as close to Mia's ribs as they could manage, as if they too missed their sister's warmth. Mia didn't push them away this time. She just sniffed at their heads, Uli, Marley, Roa, Alfie, and regretted naming them so soon. Her mind flashed back to that moment in the forest, the moment when Miss Potter had crouched, holding Mia out by her scruff, and Mia's mom had refused to come closer. Mia wouldn't have hesitated in that moment. If she had seen the thing that had taken Busy, she would have ripped out its throat, even if it put Mia in danger. Mia remembered the night in Miss Potter's house, the night Mia's tongue had hung too heavy to speak, and her mom had howled outside the door. Her mom had grieved for Mia's death without even seeing with her own 2 eyes whether Mia was still alive or not. Mia got up. She refused to believe Busy was gone. Not until she saw with her own 2 eyes. She left the shivering kids behind and limped around the den, sniffing for clues. There was nothing but rocks and roots and frost. No fur, no blood, no droppings. Then she remembered the frozen fox outside. She reached beneath the icicles, grabbed its tail, and worked it out of the snow, dragging it into the den. Mia stared at the body. How did you die? She sniffed it, tail to muzzle, searching for punctured wounds. There were none. She sniffed its ears for signs of sickness. Nothing. Finally, she pawed at its muzzle, and its jaws fell open. Caught in the fox's teeth was a tuft of white fur. When Mia was young, Miss Fix had taught her and her siblings about camouflage. Some hunters are nearly impossible to see because they have dirt-colored fur or stripes that blend with the swaying grasses. Or, Mia thought, white fur that blends with the snowy landscape. She stared into the blizzard. If she couldn't see the thing's white fur in the snow, the frost erased its scent. How could she track it? The kids whimpered, making Mia feel even more hopeless. If she went outside to search, the thing could slip back into the den and steal another kid. She wouldn't let that happen. She picked up the kids one by one and moved them to the entrance. Roa, Alfie, Marley, Uli Jr. I'm sorry, my littles, she said as they trembled in the icy gusts. We have to get your sister back. She left the shivering kids in the entrance and slipped back into the dense shadows, where she lay down. She closed her eyes and waited. It didn't take long. The air bloomed with a moldy sweet scent. Through the blur of her lashes, Mia saw it. The creature looked like a bit of winter had grown eyes and teeth. It walked in jerks and stops and was so skinny it resembled a fuzzy skeleton. The thing sniffed at Mia's ear, its breath hot. Her lips wanted to curl. Her hackles wanted to rise. She kept still. The thing padded to the pile of kids and plucked Marley up in its white jaws. Against the snowy entrance, The kid looked like he was floating. Mia could barely keep from snarling as Marley mewed and writhed in the air and then was swept beneath the icicles. It was only then that she got up. Quick as she could, she placed the 3 remaining kids under their frozen mother's fur for safekeeping. Mia set out into the night. 12. Mr. Scratch came after Uli like a storm. Uli ran faster than he ever had, but with only 3 paws and a mouthful of mice, he was too slow. His father chomped his tail, nipped his thigh, and bit into his spine so hard Uli saw red. The only reason Uli managed to stay slightly ahead of his father was that he was light on his 3 paws and didn't break through the frozen layer. Mr. Scratch's paws scrunched through the ice, but it didn't slow him much. He bounded up and down through the snow, panting fog through his bared fangs. Uli had to lose him. He ran along the bank of the river and then scrambled into the pine grove, his father not far behind. Uli leaped onto the bridge and over the hole he'd fallen through. Then he turned around and faced his father. Mr. Scratch raged across the bridge, and as Uli had hoped, the snow gave out beneath his father, devouring his hind legs. Uli's dad snarled and snapped before the snow shifted again, and he was swallowed in white. Uli didn't wait to catch his breath. He slipped out of the grove before his dad had a chance to recover on the frozen river below. Uli bounded across the snowy mound, sniffed out the earthen den, and wriggled under the icicles. He dropped the mice. "Mia?" he panted as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. 3 kids trembled and whimpered under the fur of a dead fox. 13. Marley had vanished in the flurries. Mia searched, panicking. The thing was out there somewhere, its white fur hidden in the snow. She hobbled and sniffed until she caught a faint, salty scent. She followed it to a single drop of red, bright on the snow's crust. Marley. She sniffed again, trying to find more of the kid's blood before the flurries covered it up. A few tails away, she found another drop. This blood was fresher, still streaming. She refused to think about what it meant, not while she could still act. She drew a mental line from the den, through the first red drop and the second, and then she sniffed along it until she found another, then another and another. She saw him, baby Marley, floating through the blizzard. Mia kept her distance, stepping carefully in case the white-furred thing heard her crunching paws and fled. It was almost too much seeing the kid writhe in discomfort. But Mia reminded herself that because the thing was camouflaged, its scent lost in the winter freeze, this was the only way she could find Busy. Marley's wriggling body cut a strange path across the frozen expanse. He bobbed through the gales, floating up snowy mound and down the other side. Finally, the kid vanished into the pine grove. Mia hesitated outside the trees, heart shaking. Peaches and centipedes, she told herself, breathless. If I go into this wood and fighting this thing, Marley and Busy will be able to taste peaches and centipedes. She took a deep breath and then entered the grove. The snow glowed in the darkness. Mia's ears swiveled. But all she heard was the light tap of snowflakes and the icy trickle of the river. Then something faint caught her eye. A chunk of white detached itself from the bank. It slid upriver toward the bridge Mia and Uli had crossed. Marley whimpered in the white thing's jaws. Mia crept to the bank, crouching behind the snow piles. The white thing hitched the baby kid deeper in its teeth and was about to sleep beneath the bridge when Mia threw back her head and howled. The thing whirled, dropping Marley on the bank. It bounded back to the drifts where its fur was camouflaged. Mia kept an eye on the area as she leaped down the bank onto the frozen part of the river, her claws making the ice groan. She moved under the shadow of the snowy bridge. There was Marley, quivering, tail to toes. Mia let out a whimper of relief as she worried over his tiny head. His bones were unbroken. There were no tears in his skin. It turned out he had nothing more than a nosebleed, his poor tiny nostrils cracking in the dry winter air. She wanted nothing more than to carry him back to the den to be with his siblings, but she still had to find Busy. Mia set Marley in a divot on the riverbank. Stay here. She crept under the pine bridge, looking back to check on Marley every other step. As her eyes adjusted, she saw that the riverbank was littered with the bodies of animals, torn apart in horrific ways. She held her breath, hoping not to see Busy's body among them. Mia crept deeper into the darkness until her nose caught a familiar scent. Busy? Ow. Mia followed the whimpers to the frosted wall of riverbank. There was Busy, alive, her little tongue poking out. Tears of relief melted the ice on Mia's cheeks. She licked the baby kit's ears. I'm so sorry, Busy. Sorry. I let it take you. You're safe now. Mia gasped when she found the puncture wound in Busy's side. The baby kid trembled as the life trickled out of her. Mia's voice started to quake. Shh, Mama's here now. We'll get you home, Busy. We'll get you back. Hold on. There came a small whine from the riverbank. Mia looked toward Marley, and her breath stopped short. The white creature had crept up on her. It stood between her and Marley, hunched and bristling. It was a fox, with fur as white as snow. It stared at Mia through black, gooey eyes. I don't want to fight you, she said. I just want to take these kids and leave. The fox's breath rasped, as tangled as a spider's nest. Its head twitched left, then right. Click, click, click. The sound woke the nerves in Mia's tail. She sniffed. This close. The fox's moldy fruit scent crept up her nostrils and stirred up memories she did not want stirred. The scent wasn't quite yellow. It wasn't quite apples. It was both. Click, 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 click. Mia studied the fox's face, his curled lip giving him a confused look. Roa? Click, 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 click. Mia barely recognized her brother. His body had been ravaged by the yellow disease. His eyes were narrowed to gooey slits. His legs and tail were all chewed up, and his scarred hair had grown in patches of white and gray. Roa, Mia said, eyes burning. It's me. It's Mia. Roa's head jerked side to side, moving as if some invisible thing were yanking his whiskers. His jaw shivered, making the same awful clicks their teachers had on that sweltering day. Click, 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 click. How? Mia asked. How did you survive this long? Something caught in Roa's throat, and his body convulsed. He was clearly in pain. Mia wanted to clean his fur, to soothe his snarling lips and gnawed limbs, but she couldn't go near him. More tears streamed down her whiskers. I'm so sorry, Roa. I'm sorry I left you to be chased by Miss Fix. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. A cold wind howled. The thing in Roa's throat cleared, and his body jerked forward, his cracked claws clicking on the ice. He snarled toward Mia in wobbles and halts. She backed up until her tail hit the embankment. Please, Ro, she said, don't do this. If her brother's fangs broke her skin, she would catch the yellow. Her thoughts would be overwhelmed with murderous voices, and all foxes would look like food to her. Marley, Busy, the kids in the den, Uli. Still, her brother came, rickety, toward her. Okay, Roa, she said. Okay. Mia started to circle her brother as if they were going to fight, but her hackles didn't rise, her lips didn't curl. Some instinct in her brother made him circle too. With each rotation, Roa grew closer to one of the babies, first Busy, then Marley, then Busy. Marley whimpered, and Roa's head jerked toward him. No, Mia said, drawing her brother's gooey eyes back to her. That's it, Ro. Just look at me. She glanced at the half-eaten kills on the riverbank. He hadn't killed Busy, like he had the other creatures. Was it because he'd recognized that she was a baby fox and spared her? Was her brother still in there somewhere, beneath the white fur and the yellow stench? Roa, Mia said, circling. Can you understand me? Roa answered with his teeth. Click, 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 click. Neither of us has to get hurt, she said, jaw shaking. We can return to the Ivywood. You can marry Miss Fix and start an adorable little Roa lunged. But before he could bite her, a figure fell from above. Roa whirled, snarling at the newcomer. Mia saw the dark fur, sniffed the lilac scent, and for a brief moment thought it was Wooly. But then she saw the wild eyes, the dripping blood. Mr. Scratch shook the snow from his coat and looked at Mia. I thought I smelled something familiar. He saw Roa and took a step back. Mia's heart was in a panic. Mr. Scratch stood between her and Marley. Roa stood between her and Busy. She had to find a way to get the babies to safety. Roa, Mia said, trying to find her brother beneath the yellow sand. Help me fight him, please. Something flashed in Roa's eyes, something beneath the goo. He stepped toward Mr. Scratch and snarled. This is my brother, Mia told Mr. Scratch. He has the yellow disease. If he bites you, then you'll become even meaner and grosser than you already are. Mr. Scratch nodded. So it is then. Before Mia's brother could attack, Mr. Scratch lunged and climbed onto one of Roa's bone-thin legs, ripping it out from under him. Roa thudded onto the ice, his fangs snapping at Mr. Scratch's throat. Mr. Scratch continued to hold Roa's leg, pinning him down, keeping away from his biting muzzle. But as foam and spit flacked upward, Mr. Scratch leaned back, trying to keep it from entering his wound. His teeth loosened around Roa's leg, and Roa lashed out, catching Mr. Scratch's eye with his teeth. Mr. Scratch screeched. He sank his teeth into Roa's throat and shook until Mia's brother's breath came gurgled and whimpering. Mr. Scratch released him, and Roa rounded to his paws and shuffled out from under the pine bridge, his white fur vanishing into the snows. Mr. Scratch panted, drool dripping pink from his lips. Mia snarled and raised her hackles. She could end this, but she had to be careful. Her brother had bitten the Lord of the Lilac Kingdom. If Mr. Scratch's infected fangs pierced her skin, it would all be over. Mr. Scratch saw her approaching and tried to laugh. It came out as a cough. Pity, he said, limping away. And here I am in no condition to fight. He hobbled to Marley on the bank. No, I believe I'll just take this kid and be on my way. His eyes flashed to Mia. I don't think I need to tell you what will happen if you come anywhere near me. Mia watched helpless as Mr. Scratch picked the baby up by the scruff and stepped out onto the frozen shelf of the river. If she went after him, Mr. Scratch would bite down and infect Marley. She couldn't lose another kid. Her heart couldn't take it. But then another fox fell from above. Uli leaped from the snowy bridge and landed right on top of his father, knocking Marley from his jaws. The impact made a crack in the river ice, and a chunk broke free, wobbling beneath them. No! Mia screamed. Uli! He caught her eyes wide and panicked as the ice beneath his paws bobbed and came loose. Watch out for his fangs, she cried. He has the yellow. The ice drifted from the bank, and Uli, Mr. Scratch, and baby Marley were swept downriver. 14. The ice block rocked and tipped, spraying mist and sloshing water over their paws. The baby lay belly flat between Uli and Mr. Scratch. Uli tried to steady himself on his 3 legs so he could grab the kid before his father could, but the ice spun and wobbled, and his forepaw kept slipping out from under him. Well, well, Mr. Scratch said. Look who isn't running away anymore. He smiled his slashed lips. If you aren't careful, you might just impress me. Uli kept his eyes fixed on the kid. The ice block hit a rough part of the river and nearly flipped over, splashing icy water over Uli's back and stealing his breath away. Mr. Scratch looked at the baby, soaked and whimpering in the middle of the ice. Is that what you're trying to rescue? Oh, son, have you learned nothing from your father? Let me show you what to do with needy male kids. He lunged. Without thinking, Wooly pushed with his hind paws, sliding his chest along the ice. He managed to snag the kid and sleep beneath his father's shadow before Mr. Scratch's paws touched down on the other edge of the ice. The block rocked from the impact, sliding the three foxes back and forth, threatening to spill them all into the river. Mr. Scratch huffed. Perhaps I haven't given you and that forepaw enough credit. He lunged again, and Uli pulled Marley back right before his father's fangs clamped onto the fur at the tip of Kit's tail. Mr. Scratch tugged, and the poor whimpering kid stretched between the muzzles of father and son. Uli met his father's sunset eyes. He glanced, panicked at his father's infected fangs. Okay, Dad, Uli said through his teeth. He released the kid. You win. Mr. Scratch smiled, the kid's tail hairs dangling from his teeth. You're learning to see things my way. Not quite, Uli said. He leaped, all three paws leaving the ice. Mr. Scratch's weight tipped the block, and he slid backward. Uli landed just as his father's hind legs splashed into the frigid water. Mr. Scratch gasped, and Uli snagged the kid by its tiny head, pulling him to safety. His father tried to claw back onto the ice, eyes wide, paws scrabbling. Son, he said, please. Uli scowled. You never wanted to be my dad. He leaped again. The block tipped, and Mr. Scratch slipped into the rushing river. It did not come up again. Uli slid to his belly and sniffed the baby kid. You okay, little guy? The kid clamped onto Uli's forepaw and wouldn't let go. Yeah, Uli said. I know the feeling. Uli! A howl cut through the winter air. It came from the pine grove, now many tails upriver. Meow! Uli howled back. He didn't know how to stop the whirling ice block. He could only find the red blur in the distance and watch as it shrank out of view. Mia's howls grew fainter and fainter until they faded completely. 15. Mia watched the river until Wooly and Marley became specks in the distance. Then she slipped under the pine bridge and curled up with Busy, her tail protecting the baby's tail, her muzzle the baby's muzzle. Mia soothed Busy's shivers and cleaned the wound in her side until the baby's chest felt still and her tiny blue eyes fluttered shut. Mia held her breath, hoping to hear Busy breathe again, but the baby kid was gone. Mia buried her on the riverbank. Sometimes, she said, there's a fire in the fields. A lot of foxes will breathe the smoke, and some of them will dip. Her voice broke, and she had to wait a moment before she could continue. But from the ashes, the trees will grow back greener, better than before, and there will be lots of good things to eat. And even though the fire was scary, and even though it took some foxes away, the other foxes will remember. They'll remember the foxes who died. They'll remember the smell of the smoke, and they'll tell all their friends and siblings and kids about it so that it never has to happen again. And all the foxes will live happily ever after. She sniffed, or as happy as they can be, at least. Mia laid a paw on the little mound in the mud. I love you, Busy. When she looked up, she saw two gooey eyes staring at her from the opposite bank. Goodbye, Roa, Mia said. She took one last look at the river, then left the pine grove and returned to the den. There she found the three other kids, Alfie, Uli Jr., and Roa Jr., all whimpering for her warmth. There was a pile of mice waiting for them to eat. 16. Mia passed the long winter nights by telling stories. She told the kids about the yellow stench and the 6 cruel sisters. She told them about the old witch of the wood and the golga thrush of the swamp. She told them why to beware of foxes with moon-bright fangs and pretty scents. And she told them why some horrors aren't as scary as they seem. Once her paw was feeling better, she was able to hunt again, though she never strayed too far from the den. Whenever she was outside, she kept an eye on the horizon, hoping to see a three-legged silhouette and a smaller one beside it. Winter finally died with a howl, and the sun rose back to its rightful place. The snow melted, and the ice cracked. Streams trickled, and green sprouts crept up through the soil. The trees that edged the valley lost their winter coats. Their dripping branches almost resembled antlers. Once spring had come in earnest, Mia led the kids out of the den for the first time. She watched as Alfie, Uli Jr., and Roa Jr. bounded through the field, trying to catch a grasshopper. The kids kept bonking heads, stumbling onto their muzzles, and chasing their own tails instead of the insect. Mia winced, laughing. She was tempted to guide their noses, to tell them everything they were doing wrong, but for now it was too cute. "Mom, Mom!" Roa Jr. shouted, tail wagging. He marched up to Mia and triumphantly plopped a piece of bark in front of her. "Look what I caught you!" She sniffed at it. This smells delicious." His little nose wrinkled. "Aren't you gonna eat it?" Mia said, "am going to save it, for when you and your brothers aren't looking. A hunt this special has to be relished." "Okay," Roa Jr. said, romping back toward his brothers. "You're welcome." Mia quickly pawed some dirt over the bark. Then she sighed, contented, and sniffed at their new home, the open sky, the warming grasses, the cool air whirling off an unseen creek. It was a few hairs shy of the ivy wood, but it would do. The autumn moon sank behind the antler wood. The sky grew rosy with sunrise. "Is that the end?" the little one asked. "It's the end," the storyteller said. The little one waited for something to step out from behind the trees. Miss Fix, Mr. Scratch, Miss Potter, Roa. But as dawn sipped between the branches and birds began to sing, the thought no longer put a chill in her paws. "What happened to Wooly?" she asked. "Why don't you ask him yourself?" The little one whirled, expecting to see a three-legged fox hopping toward her, but the wood was empty. Her head whipped back around. "That wasn't funny." The storyteller sighed. "It wasn't meant to be. He was supposed to jump out and scare you, but he's late." The little one wrinkled her nose in amusement. "Oh, Mia!" A voice called from the edge of the wood, making the little one jump. "Coming!" she called. She turned back to the storyteller. "Guess I gotta go." The cavern was silent. "Hello?" the little one said. "Your name is Mia?" the storyteller asked. "Yep," the little one said, pawing at the mosses. "That's how come I stayed till the end, even though it was scary. That fox has many same name. I had to find out what happened to her." There was a sniff in the cabin, and the little one couldn't tell if the storyteller was crying or smelling her fur. "Mia!" Her mom howled again. "You get home now." "Be right there," she called. Then into the cabin. "I was named after my great-great-great-great-aunt who got stolen by a human and then died. Or at least my great-great-great-great-grandma thought she died." "And who is your great-great-great-great-great-grandma?" the storyteller said. The little one wrinkled her nose. "I never learned her name, but her front paw was all curled up like this." She lifted her paw off the ground. You'd think that would have made her easier to tackle, but it didn't. The storyteller chuckled. "Maybe you shouldn't be tackling old fixins." The little one sighed. "Yeah, I guess not." "And how did your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother break her paw?" It got caught in a trap one day. She would have died, but her daughter saved her life. That kid's name was Mia, and there's been a Mia in every litter since. That's how come I got the name I did." The little one quirked her head. "The story was about her, huh?" "Yes," the storyteller said. "That story was about her." "And Wooly," the little one said. "And Wooly," the storyteller agreed. "Mia, home this instant, or I'll have your hide." "Okay," the little one held back. Then to the cabin. "Guess I gotta go for real this time, or else my mom's gonna stuff me. I don't want to end up like Mr. Todd." In the faint dawn light, the storyteller smiled. "Thank you for visiting me, Mia. Come again soon." "I will," she said as she roamed back toward her den, paws crunching the leaves. "Thanks for the stories. Thanks for making the end good. Kinda good." "It couldn't have ended any other way," the storyteller whispered. The old storyteller stepped out of the cabin, the morning light shining on her gray fur and the missing tip of her tail, which had never grown white. She sniffed after little one's sweet apple scent. Mia smiled. She'd been telling her and Uli stories for years. She told them to the kids they'd adopted and to their kids and their kids. Mia never thought she would be lucky enough to tell the stories to kids outside of this line, let alone her mother's great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. "Did I miss the jump scare?" a voice said above her. Mia looked up and found Uli, standing atop the cavern, sunlight streaming around him and the rabbit he'd hunted. "You did," Mia said, smiling. "But that's all right. Only one kid made it to the end this time." "I told you not to tell them about the Golga thrush," Uli said, hopping down from the cavern's top. "I still can't go near a puddle without getting the chills." Mia studied his dark whiskers, slowly turning gray. She remembered the way her heart had thought that bright summer morning when Wooly and Marley returned to the den. Wooly had told her the story. Once the river had slowed, many, many miles away. He'd picked the kid up, leaped off the ice block, and swam to shore using the technique Mia had taught him. Marley was so little and Wooly was so new to hunting that it had taken them months to follow the riverbank all the way back, but there they were. Once his story was finished, Mia told him what had happened to Busy, her voice shaking. Uli had listened and then licked her ears. "If we hadn't found that den," he'd whispered, "none of the kids would have made it." Mia had sniffed and said nothing, but she'd carried Uli's words with her ever since. As the sun broke over the trees, Uli and Mia left the cavern and returned to their valley. They were about to slip into the dark comfort of their den when there came a terrible sound in the distance. It buzzed and whirled like a giant insect, and soon they heard the creaky tipping of a tree, which collapsed with the great smashing of branches. The antler wood was changing right before their muzzles. Veins of light were creeping through the trees. The humans were tearing down their home. "There will be new stories soon," Wooly said, staring where the tree had fallen. Mia sighed. "And you and I won't be around to collect them." He licked her cheek, "or to suffer them." The buzzing started again, and Mia sniffed. What new horrors would the future bring for tiny kids? How would she protect them if she didn't know which stories to tell? "They'll have to learn themselves," Wooly said, as if reading her thoughts, "like we did." She gave him a lopsided smile. He gave one back. There came another sound, a giggling from the other side of the wood. "Look at my tail," the little one called to her brothers and sisters. "It's already turning white." "Nah, you just dipped it in bird droppings." "I'm not the one who left behind the pea puddle," Scaredy paws. The sound soothed Mia's whiskers. "Come on," Wooly said. "You can tell me the part of the story when I heroically tackled my dad on the ice." She smirked. "Was that how it happened? I seem to remember you accidentally falling off the bridge." "What? No, I didn't. He caught himself." Oh, haha, very funny. He dragged the rabbit into their den, and Mia took one last look at the valley. The kids of the Antler Wood knew the stories she had to tell, and while the world was changing, growing scarier with each passing moon, that thought brought some small comfort to her heart, for the time being, at least.